Alright, so today we're going to do linear functions. Linear functions are in the form with the equation y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope, rise over run, and b is your y-intercept. So, as a warm-up, you should be able to write the equation of a line passing through the point 4, 7 and -2, 5. So hopefully this is a review of your Algebra 1 and Geometry and even Algebra 2. So first, if you want to write the equation, you're going to need to know what the slope is. So again, that's rise over run, and then we'll also have to know what the y-intercept is. But we'll do the slope first. Alright, so slope, as I said, is rise over run. You are going to have to memorize these formulas. So if you have difficulty memorizing the formula, if you can remember rise over run, that kind of lets you know that when you rise, that's your changes in your y value, because, let me graph it. If you have this dot and this dot, your y is your change in the rise, and then your run is your change in the x's. So the formula is y2 minus y1 over so that's how you change your y's, and then over changing your x's, x2 minus x1. Alright, so I need to look at those 2 points again, 4, 7 and -2, 5. So that's equal to 4 is my x1 and 7 is my y1. -2 is my x2 and 5 is my y2. So I'm going to plug in 5 for y2 minus y1 is 7 over x2 is -2 minus x1 is 4. So 5 minus 7 is -2, and -2 minus 4 is -6, and that reduces down to 1/3. So this is my slope. We'll call that step 1, find your slope. Okay, so after I find my slope, I also need to be able to tell what the y-intercept is. So there's a second formula that we used a lot in algebra, and it was called the point-slope formula. The reason why we call it point-slope formula is because if you know a point you want to pass through, and you also know the slope of your line, then you can use this formula. So we'll call that step 2, point-slope formula. So the point-slope formula is y minus y1 equals m x minus x1 with parentheses. So I've already labeled y1 as 7 and x1 as 4, so I'll go ahead and keep that, and my slope is 1/3. So y minus 7 equals 1/3 x minus 4. So it looks like I'll need to do distribution right here, and then I'll also have to add 7. So first I'll distribute. So y minus 7 equals 1/3 x minus 4/3. And then lastly, I will add 7 to both sides, so plus 7. And when I add 7, that's just a number, so I'll be adding that to the -4/3. So this is without a calculator, so I'm having to have to add that, which is fraction adding. So I'll need a common denominator. So multiply 3 over 3 to be adding 21 over 3. So if I add these two numbers, I get 17 over 3. So a final answer is y equals 1/3 x plus 17/3. Okay. So that's it for the warm-up. If you want to just kind of make sure you understand all this, 1/3 would be your slope. So that means you'd go up 1 over 3. And 17/3 is your y-intercept. It's kind of hard to think about 17 over 3. Let's see, 15 over 3 would be 5. So 17 over 3 is like 5 2/3. So almost 6. So your graph would cross at almost 6, and it would go up 1 over 3. So, I mean, it looks something like this. It's a very rough graph, but it's something like that. All right. Let's do some more linear functions. So lines that are parallel have slopes which are the same. Because if you have two parallel lines, then they must rise and run the same amount in order for them to never cross. So I'm just gonna put the exact same here. In contrast, perpendicular lines have slopes which are, we called it flip-op in Algebra 2 and geometry. The more technical term is negative reciprocal, which you'll probably see in textbooks, and I mean, if you go any further in math, they'll probably use the term negative reciprocal rather than flip-op. They mean the same thing. Flip-op is just a very visual way to say flip the fraction and opposite sign. Negative just means if it was positive, make it negative. If it's negative, make it positive. And then reciprocal is flipping the top to bottom. So same thing, just different words. All right, so example 1, if I want to find the slope of a line, that is parallel to x minus 3y equals 21, then I need to have the same slope. But when I look at this equation, I don't even know what the slope is, and that's because it's not in the form y equals mx plus b. So before you start really answering the question, we'll have to first isolate the variable y. So x minus 3y, I'm just rewriting the problem right now, equals 21. So if I want to isolate the variable, I'm going to subtract x first. So negative 3y equals negative x plus 21. And then I'll divide by negative 3. So I get y equals, so there's a coefficient of 1 here. So negative 1 over negative 3 is positive 1/3 x. And then 21 over negative 3 is negative 7. All right, so keep in mind this is just the original given line. That's just x minus 3y in terms of isolating the variable y. So right now what I know is that the original slope, original m, is equal to, it's the number in front of the x term, so 1/3. Okay, so if I want to answer the question, what is a line, what is the slope of a line that's parallel? Well, a parallel slope, so I'm just being really technical with my notation. A parallel slope would be also 1/3 because it's the exact same as the original one. Okay, so the parallel slope would be 1/3. Now, if I want to find the slope of a line that is perpendicular, so I'm still using this equation, it says to the line above, so using this equation, what is a perpendicular slope? So a perpendicular slope, so again, just using that notation to note that I'm using a perpendicular slope. If I flip 1/3, it becomes 3/1, and since this was positive, or this was positive, I'll make it negative. So negative 3/1, or if you just said -3, that's certainly the same thing as well. I would take either one of those answers. Okay? All right. Example 2. Find the equation of the line containing 3, -2 and parallel to the line y equals 4. So first of all, y equals 4. If you notice, this only has the letter y in the equation. And when I first started talking about linear functions, I said it's always y equals mx plus b, where it's got the letter y and x. Well, it's because this is like the general slanted line. So, I mean, it's got a slope that slants up or down, but it is slanted. If you only have the letter x or only have the letter y, then it's either going to be horizontal or vertical. So you should maybe recall, there's not a ton of space on this paper, so you might want to write yourself a few notes somewhere, but you might want to recall Hooy Vux. So I'll say this slowly if you want to write this down. Hooy stands for horizontal lines have a 0 slope with a y equals equation. So let me say that again. Horizontal lines have a 0 slope with a y equals equation. So if I ask you what is the slope of y equals 4, you would say, well, it's a 0 slope. Okay? And that's why it's a horizontal line, is because you're rising 0 ways. So horizontal lines have a 0 slope with a y equals equation. Vux is vertical lines have an undefined slope with an x equals equation. So that should make sense too, that vertical lines have an undefined slope, because if you think about a vertical line, when we first started this unit, we said that a function can't be vertical. It has to pass the vertical line test. So the fact that it's just a vertical line kind of contradicts that idea, and that's what makes it undefined. All right, so anyways, going back to the question, this is just really good information you really need to be able to know for the quiz. But to answer the question, if I want to contain the point 3, -2 and be parallel to y equals 4. So first of all, let's graph y equals 4. It's important that you can do that. So here's the y-axis, here's 4, and this is going to be, I know it's Hooy because it's a y equals equation. Y equals is the only letter. And so I'm going to be a horizontal line on 4. So this green line represents y equals 4. Okay? So if I want to contain the point 3, -2, so now I'll plot that. That's right here. And I also want to be, it says to be parallel. Parallel. Then in order to be parallel to a horizontal line, I'd have to be also horizontal. So this is what the line would look like, but I do want the equation. And so since I know it's a horizontal line, I'd be following Hooy again. And so I know that this horizontal line would have a 0 slope with a y equals equation, which is what I'm looking for. And so that y is equal to, if you look at the y-axis, it's equal to -2, which is not surprising because if you notice that -2 is that y value. So the answer to this is y equals -2. Make sure you put y equals -2 and not -2. -2 is a number. Y equals -2 is the horizontal line passing through -2. All right. Example 3, this, let me just forewarn you, is a rather long problem. So let's go through this. All right, so we're going to find the equation of the perpendicular bisector of the line segment joining the points -1, -3, and 4, 1. So if you're not really sure how to start this problem, I recommend just plotting those 2 points. -1, -3 is here, and 4, 1 is here. So let's read it again. Find the equation of the perpendicular bisector of the line segment joining the points -1, -3, and 4, 1. So this word, perpendicular bisector, back in geometry, this was a vocab term where if you have a segment and you want to find the perpendicular bisector, then that was a line that goes through it exactly at the middle and at a 90-degree angle, perpendicular. So the word itself is pretty descriptive. You want to be perpendicular and you want to bisect it. So go back to our actual picture. We want, so this is the segment, and what we want to do is we want to find the exact middle. So somewhere about there. We're going to have to actually find it, but somewhere about there. And we also want a line, so we want to find the equation of the line that goes through that point at a 90-degree angle, perpendicular. So this red line is what I'm looking for. Alright, so let's think about how I'm going to find that. So the first thing that I said is you could do it in either way, but if you want to be perpendicular, then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to find my original slope, and then I'm going to have to flip-op it, or negative reciprocal. So first let's, oops, that's too big. Let's find the original slope. So my original slope m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Oh, here's the points. I don't know what I'm doing. So let's call this x1, y1, and x2, y2. So 1 minus -3 over 4 minus x1, -1. So both of those end up changing to positive. So 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 minus -1, 4 plus 1 is 5. So my original slope is going to be 4 over 5, which means the slope of this red line is going to be -5 over 4. Okay, so I'm going to use the slope of this red line, and I know it's -5 over 4 because that's the perpendicular. Alright, what else do we have to do? Well, I've taken care of the perpendicular part of it, so that's checked. Now I want to find the bisector part of it. Don't forget to do both parts. So the bisector part of it said I have to be in the exact middle. So if I want to be in the middle, that's midpoint. And you do have a formula for midpoint, but I've already given you a few formulas to memorize. What I always think of for midpoint is the average. So what I mean by that is if you have this y value and this y value, then this one is exactly in the middle of that. It's the average of the y's. If you have this x value and this x value, this x value is going to be exactly in the middle. So what I do is I average my two x's, so that's my x. So averaging is adding together, dividing by 2. So negative 1 plus 4 is 3. 3 divided by 2 doesn't reduce, so I'll just write 3 divided by 2. I prefer fractions. I think they're a little bit easier in this case. I also have to average the y's. So negative 3, add 1 is negative 2, divided by 2 is negative 1. All right, so I know what the point I want to pass through is, and I know what the slope I'm going to use is. So I've got point slope. So once again, I'm going to use point slope formula. So when you have a point and you have a slope, you're going to use point slope formula. Y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. So y minus, so remember this y1 and x1 are the point that you want to pass through. Don't use this over here because that was for the original line. We want this point right here. That's why we're going to use 3/2 comma negative 1. So y minus y1 is negative 1 equals m is negative 5 over 4 x minus 3/2. All right, so we've got y plus 1 and distribute negative 5 over 4 x, and this is going to have to just multiply fractions. So negative times negative makes positive, and then that's 15 over 8. All right, so my last step will be to subtract 1. Subtract 1. Common denominator is 8 over 8, so that makes 7 over 8. So answer, y equals negative 5 over 4x plus 7 over 8. And that will be it. We're going to stop here for these notes. Due to the scheduling, we are splitting this up into 2 days. So we'll do the back on the next day. The quiz that you have tomorrow, this will be all that the quiz covers as far as 7.3 goes. The quiz also covers 7.1, which was Intro to Functions, 7.2, which is Domain and Range, and also piecewise functions, and this. So that's what's on the quiz. I do have a review on my website as well, so if you want to find that, it should be just the next one down.